Your Pharmacy Career Podcast, proudly brought to you by Ravens Recruitment, Australia's pharmacy recruitment agency, spotlights the myriad of career paths available to pharmacists. Your host, Christy Lee Patterson, and her esteemed guests will be sharing invaluable career advice that you can implement at any stage of your career journey.
Hello and welcome to Your Pharmacy Career Podcast, the podcast that dives into the lives and careers of pharmacists making a real impact. I'm your host, Christy Lee Patterson, and today I am so excited to have Jenny Kirschner here with us. Jenny is a pharmacist with over 20 years of experience, and more importantly, she's the founder of PALS, Pharmacy Addressing Loneliness and Social Isolation. Jenny's journey is truly inspiring, and I can't wait to share it all with you. So welcome to the show, Jenny.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited and delighted to be here to have a chat with you.
Awesome. So, Jenny, your work with PALS is groundbreaking, but I want to start from the beginning and understand what was your first motivation to even do pharmacy in the first place?
It's a nice question to start with. So my dad's actually a pharmacist. So I recall being very little and doing the display windows in the pharmacy. And I feel like that was the thing that got me in there, was running the Christmas tables out the front and doing display windows. That I really thought what I thought pharmacy was about, like really creative. And so they were the early memories. But then it very much was about being able to help people. That's what drew me to pharmacy, the gateway to be able to support and help people.
Yep. So did you do anything else in between? Did you go straight into pharmacy from school?
No, I went straight into pharmacy. I did some travel soon after, but I went straight in, yeah.
Oh, wow. Your dad made that much of an impact, so that's great.
Yeah.
I know about you, actually.
He's still a pharmacist. He actually still has 2 pharmacies and works way too much. He's slowing down, but slow.
Yeah, that must be where you get your work ethic from.
Yes. Good or bad, I'm not sure, but yes.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. And you've clearly carried that passion throughout your career, just in the time that I've known you from afar and then getting to know you more personally. Can you tell us a little bit about your early experiences in pharmacy, and did that actually influence your decision to start PALS?
Yeah, I've actually done quite a few things in pharmacy. So I worked at the Alfred Hospital. Actually, prior to the Alfred Hospital, I lived in London for a little bit and I worked in a hospital pharmacy over there. And that was my first introduction to hospital pharmacy and clinical pharmacy that I really fell in love with. So when I came back, I worked in the Alfred Hospital for about 7 years, 5 of which were clinical pharmacy. And then the last 2 was a project around antimicrobial stewardship. So I was running that project. I always laugh because it was a 6-month contract that lasted 2 years. As you can imagine, to get consensus around guidelines in a big hospital took a long time. But as I'm speaking to you, I'm having flashbacks actually of my internship. So perhaps I can just start there because I'm really lucky. I worked in a tiny pharmacy. It was really small in Altona in Melbourne. And I worked for a pharmacist she was the president of something of the Pharmaceutical Society of Australia at the time. Right? So she was very much into counselling. So it was a tiny square pharmacy, but every patient who came in for a Ventolin, we had to counsel. She really made me sit there and go through it. And I would meet her early and we would go through each shelf and understand each drug and how it worked and kind of ordered it and cleaned it up so it kind of made sense from a consumer perspective, also a patient perspective. But she was so passionate. She really taught me the value of being there for the patient. Right? Like that was her ethos. And she said to me, Jenny, my job is to make you a better pharmacist than me. She wasn't ego-driven. She was true leadership about giving me the skills to do a great job as a pharmacist. And even back then, and we think about PALS now and PALS being addressing loneliness and social isolation, I remember connecting with patients who would come and perhaps didn't have a home and would just hang outside the pharmacy. And I remember buying people coffee, and in return, people were buying me coffee. It was always about engaging with the person. And yes, I knew things about medication, but it was understanding that the special gift, from my opinion, about being a pharmacist is that unique relationship that you get to have with people. That was really something that from day one I was able to understand and appreciate that we're in a privileged position to connect with people who trust us. Okay, so fast forward, I worked in the hospital, then I worked in retail pharmacy. I also did health coaching. So I trained to be a health coach and worked for Diabetes Australia on telephone health coaching programs. That was about understanding that motivation requires behaviour change principles and learning to help people along that journey who wanted to make change and had goals, being able to break it down and really work towards something that was achievable. And then I've done random other things, like created raw organic chocolate that was and in a commercial kitchen and distributed in Melbourne and Sydney, and imported superfoods from Africa, and so a range of other kind of things. I also held a role as a health programs pharmacist, a national health programs pharmacist for a banner group, which was a great experience to learn how to implement programs at scale. And then, I guess when I think about it, I always felt like there was something a little bit missing in pharmacy. And part of that, I guess, was I feel like I am quite a creative soul, and I kind of needed to bring that out in a way, shape or form that also helped people. There are early days when I remember prescribing TED Talks, so inspirational talks, to patients on the methadone program. I just write them on a piece of paper and say to the patient, come back and chat with me tomorrow, because I just intuitively felt that patient needed some motivation. And again, what a lucky and privileged position that we're in, that we do things like stage supply or methadone or buprenorphine or some opioid replacement therapy, where we get to see patients on a regular basis. We get to have this social capital, this special relationship. And really, I think a lot of the value in those services, a lot of the value comes from the conversation, having someone that they can go to every day, stable and consistent, and we get to see and respond to the fluctuations in mood or energy or enthusiasm. So I guess I've just kind of given you a big dump of a whole lot of different things that I've done, but they've all been about the same thing. They've all been about how do I really connect with a person and help that person. And I guess that culminated in the creation of PAL.
I think I can definitely see the common theme throughout everything that you've done, and that's human connection. And when you mentioned about patients coming in for their methadone or what have you, stage supply, and seeing them as a human, like just giving them, like prescribing them those motivational TED Talks, right? You're seeing them as an actual human being, and you're spending a couple of minutes with them anyway while you're watching them dose. So why not actually have a conversation about some other things? And that could have such a huge impact on that person's life. Yeah, really change the trajectory of their life as well. Yeah, I think PALS is really such an important initiative, and I can see those themes coming through. But I think I'd love for you to tell our listeners more about it and what you are aiming to achieve with PALS.
Yeah, sure. So PALS, as you've mentioned, stands for Pharmacy Addressing Loneliness and Social Isolation. Now, really the mission of PALS is to inspire, educate and mobilise the entire pharmacy industry to help address loneliness, to improve the health of community and wellbeing of community at scale. So it's a big, bold mission, but really it is, how do we get everybody inspired and appreciating that this is a problem, educated in the science of loneliness and the impacts it has on health, both mental, physical, and even cognitive health and medication use? And then how do we mobilise this network of highly accessible, trusted professionals to lean in and help play a role in the ecosystem of addressing this? Now, at the moment, Queensland government have just completed a parliamentary inquiry into loneliness and social isolation, and New South Wales have just commissioned one, and the ACT have commissioned. So what we're seeing is this is a significant issue, and there is an appreciation, a growing appreciation, that there's a pharmacy network who could really be involved. And it's not just community pharmacy. There are many examples of hospital pharmacists, consultant pharmacists, aged care, GP, practice-based pharmacists. Everybody can play a role because of the relationship we have with people. Now, the first thing we've done, which I'm really humbled and excited and thrilled about, is launching a world-first pharmacist training program on loneliness. So this really is, there's nothing in the world that is a training program dedicated to loneliness, specifically for pharmacists or even health professionals, full stop, I might add, but this is pharmacist specific. And this takes people through the science of loneliness, everything from what it is, as I've shared, how common, the impacts it has, the stigma associated with it, and then practically what pharmacists can do at a patient level, a pharmacy level, and a community level. And importantly, and I was intentional about this, the last module talks about loneliness in pharmacists and in pharmacy interns.
Interesting. And do you know what? That's just a huge achievement. The fact that it's world first, right? Like that's amazing. Like you would think that surely someone out there has done something, but they haven't. So hats off to you for just, getting this done. And I know to pull something like this together, if you're just watching on the sidelines and seeing what Jenny's doing, these things don't just happen overnight. Like this is years of work that you put together to launch this. But what has the response been like in the pharmacy industry, or just in Australia since you've launched the program?
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you that. I'm going to bring up a couple of testimonials just to read out because it's really touching and speaks to your question. Before that, I wanted to say, yes, this has been years of hustle. And for all those budding entrepreneurs out there, pharmacist entrepreneurs, I did things like reach out to the World Health Organization and ask them if they would be available for an interview, because to me, this was very important that it was evidence-based and from global experts. And they said yes. So my message to all the listeners is sometimes it's just worth giving it a shot. If you're wholeheartedly passionate about something, the worst that can happen is that someone will say no. And in this case, someone said yes. So there are expert interviews, which is important. But I'm going to share with you some of the feedback. There have been, so the launch was about just over 2 weeks ago at the Pharmaceutical Society of Australia National Conference. And there's hundreds, Christy Lee, it's quite about hundreds of pharmacists who have signed up, right? No exaggeration, hundreds. And this is, to me, it's kind of like a given permission for people to say, yes, this is important. It's not about drugs. It's not about money. It's not about ROI directly at all, return on investment. This is about just connecting the world and making it a better place. And it's kind of a declaration also to say, hey, as an industry, we can be involved. That's what it speaks to when I see those numbers. So some of the feedback have been things around, because there's a lot of videos, absolutely brilliant. I thought I'd have the media content as background while I did other work, but I ended up glued to it. I've never felt compelled to give feedback like this before, so well done. I'm going to share another one. I wanted to express my heartfelt gratitude and admiration for the incredible work that you have done in creating this course. It was expertly crafted, engaging and informative, and each module providing a comprehensive understanding of loneliness. Your passion and expertise shone through in every aspect of the course. Now, I'm sharing this not to show off. I'm sharing this hopefully as motivation for people that what I tried to create is a program that takes you on a journey, because all of us have experienced loneliness at some point in our lives. It's very common, it's very human. And so my desire was that I could gift the industry the science, but also a supportive journey to kind of unpack what loneliness is and realize that it doesn't have to be a depressing story. It's actually a hopeful story about all the things that we can do and the value of human connection to improve health and well-being. I want to share one more because this was really
Yes, please.
This pharmacist is a clinical pharmacist and a pharmacy academic, said, I did it all in one hit, and it actually felt like I was watching a Netflix movie, but in an educational way. And then the take-home messages were wonderful. Thank you. What a fantastic work. So for those who feel compelled or interested, I hope that it's a journey for you also that is really enjoyable. It is accredited. There are 10 CPD points available. There's an investment because this is a science. This is not just quickly do it in an hour and you know everything. I've been intentionally comprehensive and have consulted. I have a scientific advisor, technical advisor for the program who is a professor of loneliness. So everything is the latest research to get, as I said, the pharmacy industry across the information, feeling inspired and empowered. And the key here is I'm also not asking pharmacists to do everything. I'm asking for little kind moments that, as you mentioned, can be absolutely transformative to an individual.
Wow. Just listening to those testimonials, I actually am feeling a little bit emotional, actually, like to hear that it's already had an impact on people and it's compelled them to actually reach out to you and share those things. Like, that's really rare. So, like, just, yeah, well done. And it just shows how important this topic is as well. And I think you just mentioned that they don't have to do everything, and that's really important too, because the pharmacists, we get it. We've got a lot of things to do, right? And, this could be another program, but it's going to be too hard. It's like, no, this is a journey, and it's almost creating a movement, right? And those small little moments, how that can just blossom into changing someone's life, which you might not even realize at the time.
And I think that what you're saying is also true, that lots of pharmacists already do a lot of this stuff. This is just kind of bringing it to the forefront. So, for example, I just had a pharmacist reach out, and I will connect with him next week. So he's completed the program, and he's shared with me, or about to share, a story where he's actually made an entire book about the stories of all his patients. Right?
Wow.
He collated it and has printed it. So there are pharmacists, again, I get goosebumps as I'm sharing that. There are pharmacists who are doing things. And as you move through the training, there are pharmacist interviews of those passionate pharmacists addressing loneliness as some of the little things they're doing, like having a couch instead of seats so it feels homely. Little things that go a long way.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. I think you mentioned a little bit earlier that why you were so passionate about loneliness is that everyone has experiences with loneliness. So I'm sure you have your own personal experience as well. I wondered if you would be open to sharing a little bit of that, and what were those moments that shaped who you are today and that drives that passion for you to keep going? And because when you're an entrepreneur, right, it's really hard to keep going sometimes. You've really got to make sure that you've got this vision, and that's what gets you up every day. So, have you got any comments that you can share around that?
Yeah, so I think it was about in my 20s and 30s. So for quite a long period of time, I felt a lot of loneliness. But like you learn when you go through the journey of learning about loneliness, there's a lot of shame and stigma associated with loneliness. And internally, it's a painful feeling, and it's a feeling like there's something wrong with you. That's kind of what manifests. And because of that, most people, including myself, can hide it really well. So, I was busy working at hospital or working in retail, and nobody would have known I was outgoing and, cheery and smiley. But internally, and loneliness can be contextual, and there are different types of loneliness. But, I was living alone, which was out of choice. I was living alone. I'd bought an apartment. I felt like I was on this, linear trajectory to what was meant to be this tick box successful kind of lifestyle, but I wasn't feeling that. And so I think for many years, since that time, I always thought, what can I do about this? And I've got mind maps and lots of different boards from years ago of what I was going to do to address this. I was fortunate enough last year to be part of a clinical entrepreneur program where I also pitched to try and address loneliness. I guess the conclusion I came to is, or the knowledge I came to is, loneliness is very complex, very common, and it's very normal. It's like a social pain telling us that our relationships are not what we want them to be. But there are many influences, triggers and risk factors and contextual elements that all influence it, right? So it's not easy to address. But what happened is I thought after COVID, this is a good time to talk about this. And who is my network? I thought, pharmacy is the place that I could start. And the more I went into that, the more I realized, hey, nobody understands this as a problem. And if I could bring education, that goes a long way, because as we've discussed, there's a whole pharmacy network who could help to normalize, destigmatize, and bring this subject more to awareness and encourage social connection, much like we encourage healthy eating and exercise. So I think it's all stemmed, this whole passion and commitment and drive, hustle, determination, hustle, and more came from my own experiences of loneliness and how deeply painful it was as an experience despite hiding it. And at the time, there were no resources available. I mean, I went looking, no courses, a couple of TED Talks, there wasn't much available at the time. So I always thought I'd like to create something that I wish I could have gone through myself to understand this and again, loneliness is not mental health condition and it's not depression either. It's distinguished from those. It's still something that we need to know about because it's more than a hard feeling. It's a modifiable risk factor that is a precursor to many chronic diseases and other conditions. So, yeah, my personal experience drove my passion, and I think having this feedback now, seeing people engage, seeing hundreds of people interested, motivates me now to keep going and motivates me to realise that we have Australia that we need to address, and then actually the whole pharmacy industry can be involved in helping to address loneliness because it is such a global issue. The World Health Organization last year in November launched a commission on social connection, putting loneliness as a health priority, similar to other public health priorities like obesity, tobacco use, opioid addiction. This is the kind of language the WHO is using to signify the relevance and importance of addressing this. So back to your question, yes, it came from my own personal experiences which drive me. And I've always been an empath, an empathetic person, and I always saw in patients, not in a spiritual way, but I felt like I could always sense, not saw, but I could always sense loneliness. And even to this day, if I see somebody or have that sense or are engaged in conversation with someone who's lonely, it is like a bit of a post-traumatic trigger. I can feel the pain. I can assume, everyone's loneliness is different, but I can assume or have empathy for what I imagine that is like. We can all imagine old patients in their house, elderly patients who see nobody, who have no telephone calls. We can all connect with that experience, whether it's our parent or a grandparent or just even a friend who might be having a hard time. We can all relate to how painful and hard that must be. So that drives me. Yeah.
Yeah, you just mentioned like patients and things and some of the older clientele that pharmacies might have. Yeah, they might not get any phone calls. And I know sometimes, working in a pharmacy, you get that person that calls up every day to ask for a packet of Panamax delivered, and you just think, this bloody person's wasting my time. But yeah, having that knowledge about loneliness to the forefront can really help you just change the way that you address those situations, I think. And I literally just thought of that then as you were speaking. I thought, oh, wow, yeah, picking up on those little cues.
Yep.
Not everyone is lucky enough to be naturally empathetic person to be able to feel those feelings. But yeah, what are the other things that you can notice that could be maybe a sign? So that would, I think learning those things would be really valuable.
Yeah, and there's a whole module dedicated also to being able to understand and pick up the signs and symptoms. One of the tricky things is, and this shouldn't put people off trying to reach out to someone, is that loneliness is subjective, right? So it's just, if I feel lonely, I am lonely. It's a very subjective experience, so it's hard to see. As I shared with myself, I hid it well. I know customers like you who come in and they space out their script fulfillment because they're just coming in to chat. There are other patients who come in and you can see they're oversharing, right? They just want to tell you there's a desperation for connection and they just want to get it all out. So there's some of the things to look out for. But you also made me think of one of the interviews that I did with a pharmacist in the program, and she talks about the fact that she used to write some little letters, that tear off, we're on e-scripts now, but the old prescription, little paper on the bottom. And she'd just put something like a smiley face or have a nice day, something very gentle, not a big effort. And she'd put it in the delivery bag and she'd send it home with patients. And one day she went face-to-face to visit this particular patient who was an elderly lady. And she said, I didn't write you a letter today because I've come to visit you today. And not to over give away the story, but this is one worth sharing. And this elderly lady had collected for months these little letters and had them saved in an envelope in her drawer. And that's when the pharmacist realised, to your point, that she had made an impact on this lady. Now, again, this isn't a whole program. I'm not asking anyone to do a program. I'm not asking anyone to do anything special other than just lean in sometimes to the discomfort of, like you're saying, someone who might be a bit lonely, and recognize that doing something little, like a smiley face, like an extra minute of attention or an extra minute of having patience to hear them, can be absolutely transformative to how they feel about themselves and their day and their life. There's a campaign overseas in the UK called Making, approximately this title, Making Moments Matter. And that's what I'm kind of calling the pharmacy arms to say, let's make these moments matter. Now, this training program is pharmacist specific, but this is for pharmacy. PAL stands for Pharmacy Addressing Loneliness and Social Isolation. This is a whole team effort. So exactly like you're saying, there are little things. If you identify or just have a feeling that somebody is not in contact with anyone else or it's not meaningful, just little things that we can do. And the training program goes through, it gives you, there's flyers available that you can print out for free from the training program that talk about a little bit about loneliness and the importance of social health. There are examples of things that I've done in community and in pharmacy. So there's a rich kind of practical toolkit there to be able to go and do something. You don't have to do it all, but there are little things that you can do that, can make a difference.
I just feel like this whole program and that training program that you've developed is such an invaluable resource, just not only just as a pharmacist, but just as a human being as well. Definitely am going to put it on my list to really make sure that I do actually finish this course. I started a little bit of it last night. And if you are a PSA member as well, so you've partnered with the Pharmaceutical Society of Australia, and if you're a member, you can actually access this for free. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. So you just jump onto the education portal and can search for the pharmacist training program on loneliness, and it's free for PSA members. And there is a button, if you're a non-PSA member and you feel inclined to do it, you can purchase the program through there also.
Amazing. Well, before I wrap up, I'd love to give you the opportunity to have this floor to say anything else that you'd like to mention about maybe your career or PALS or something that we haven't touched on. Yes, I'll give the floor to you, Jenny.
Okay, I'm just having a think. I think really, I think probably the fact that there were times in pharmacy where the fit didn't feel 100% right. And in many ways, my friends laugh at me that I've kind of carved out my own journey here, which aligns to my values, which is around, as you shared, connection, human connection. So I guess there's two messages here for me that I'd like to end with. Number one is, yes, if you feel inclined, I would love you to come on the journey and join the movement, like you say, to understand what loneliness is and the role that you can play and that you might already be doing. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm really hungry for examples of pharmacists that are doing things. I want to share their stories, so feel free to reach out to me with any stories you have. And the other part of this is to aspiring pharmacist entrepreneurs, is that I think sometimes you really just need to trust your gut. And if there's a problem that you're passionate about, that you feel like needs solving, as complex as that might seem, if you stay determined, I really believe that you can chip away. I mean, I'm just chipping a little bit. It's just a little bit of chipping away at the big problem here. But I feel like this is my most satisfying work to date, absolutely. And something that I feel internally, I feel a sense of peace around, that I've been able to contribute something that feels meaningful, really deeply meaningful. So, yeah, it's an invitation to everyone to join the loneliness movement, but also to commit to your own internal value and internal passions, because I feel like they're individuals who commit to these kind of things are the ones that can kind of help to chip away at some of the big, what they call wicked problems of our times. So thank you so much for chatting with me.
No problem. And just to finish on that, there's a quote, I've got no idea who has said it, but it's just popped into my head. And it's, nobody can do everything, but everyone can do something. And so I think that's a nice way to kind of wrap everything up, especially on this topic of loneliness, right? It's a mountain, but just slowly chipping away. And if you've got that passion on a topic or anything, just chip away at it one step at a time. It's a journey, and sometimes that journey can be lonely.
Absolutely.
And so I can definitely relate to that. So Jenny, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Your work with PALS is inspiring. I know people sometimes throw those words around to people, but truly it is. So you're sticking through with your vision and your passion. And I hope some of our listeners have really gained a lot from your insight. If you are interested in learning more about PALS or the training program, we will have the links in the show notes, but you can also connect with Jenny on LinkedIn, and also PALS have their own LinkedIn page as well. So as always, thank you for tuning into Your Pharmacy Career podcast. And thank you, Jenny, so much for spending the time with me today.
Absolute pleasure. I love chatting with you. Thanks so much, Christy Lee.
You've been listening to Your Pharmacy Career podcast, brought to you by Ravens Recruitment. Don't miss our next episode, where we continue to explore the multifaceted world of pharmacy careers. Make sure to subscribe and share.